I went to give a presentation at my husband's company. His boss looked me up and down and said, "Now I understand why he stays late at the office." Everyone laughed. I walked toward her and she froze when I said, "Funny how there is a kind of humiliation that hurts differently from all the others. Not the kind that comes from a stranger. Not the kind that comes from a family member you already know is going to land a blow. The one you show up to events half prepared for because you know the script by heart. It's the kind that finds you when you're at the top of what you've built, prepared, competent, materials in hand, ready to deliver the best work of your career. And someone opens their mouth and decides out loud in front of everyone that what matters is your body." I was 32 years old that day. I had arrived early. I had tested the projector, organized the printed copies of my materials, had coffee alone in the small conference room while I waited for people to file in. I was wearing a dark teal blouse I liked, black slacks, hair pulled back. I looked good. I looked professional. I was ready. And then she walked in. Courtney Aldridge, Director of Human Resources at Meridian Peak Solutions, the company where my husband Jason had worked for 4 years. She walked in with that energy of someone who controls the room just by opening the door. Heels, blowout, perfume that arrived before she did. She looked me up and down in a 2-second sweep that lasted an eternity. And before I could say good morning, before I could introduce myself as the consultant, as the person they had hired to overhaul their internal communications program, she turned to the group trailing behind her and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, with a smile at the corner of her mouth, "Now I understand why Jason stays late at the office." The silence lasted 1 second, then the laughter. Not everyone, 4 or 5 people, but it was enough to make the blood rush to my ears and drop to my feet at the same time. Enough for me to understand exactly what she had said. Enough to root me in place for a moment that felt like a full year passing. But here's what no one expected. Not her. Not the group that had laughed. Not me. I didn't stay rooted. I turned. I took 2 steps toward her. And when her smile began to falter, when she realized I was moving closer and not backing away, I said in a low, very calm voice, "Funny how—" I stopped. I let the silence do the work. "Funny how the only comment you could make about the consultant you hired was about my body. Must mean my resume didn't give you much to talk about." She froze. But that's not the most important part of this story. The most important part is everything that came before. And everything that came after. If you've ever walked into a room knowing you were good at what you do, and walked out feeling like you weren't enough because of something that has nothing to do with what you do, stay with me. Because I want to tell you how this story began. How it almost destroyed me. And how it ended in a way I still can't describe without feeling that cold, proud ache in my chest. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And tell me in the comments, what's the moment someone completely ignored what you had to offer and only commented on your body? I want to read every single response. Let me tell you how we got here. Because to understand what I said in that conference room, you need to understand the years that taught me to speak that way, and the years that almost taught me to stay silent forever. My name is Danielle Hargrove. I grew up in Columbus, Ohio, the youngest of 3 daughters in a family that my mom liked to call solidly middle class. Dad worked in insurance, Mom was an office manager at a dental practice downtown. We owned our house. We took road trips to the Smoky Mountains every August, and we had the kind of stability that made people from the outside think everything was fine. And in a lot of ways it was. My parents weren't cruel people. They weren't malicious, but they were the kind of family that paid very close attention to how things looked. Not in a way anyone ever said out loud. In a way that was just in the air. I was the youngest of 3. My sister Christy was thin, athletic, ran cross-country all 4 years of high school. My sister Amber was thin, effortlessly pretty, had a boyfriend by sophomore year. And I was Danielle, funny, sharp, the one who could make the whole table stop eating to listen to a story. And fat, not fat in a hiding under baggy clothes way. Actually fat, from early on, the kind of body that people notice and feel strangely authorized to comment on. As if your size is public information they're entitled to discuss. I liked myself. That matters. And I want to say it clearly. Before everything I'm about to tell you, I need you to know I had a good life inside my body. I liked reading on the floor of my bedroom with the fan running. I liked cooking Sunday dinners with my mom, the kind that took 2 hours and dirtied every dish in the kitchen. I liked dancing at parties even when no one asked me first. I had friends, I got good grades, I had opinions about everything. I was real, I was whole. But there was something that happened at home with a frequency I took way too long to recognize as a pattern. My body kept coming up in conversation. Not violently, gently, worriedly. almost lovingly. My mom would hug me and run her hand over my stomach and say, "You've been eating a lot lately, honey." My dad would look at my plate at dinner and make that face. The one that meant he wanted to say something and was deciding not to, and then he'd say it anyway. "Danny, do you really need all that?" My sister Christy would lend me clothes and comment, "We should get you into a workout routine. That top would look so much better on you if you lost even just a little." And I'd laugh, or ignore it, or change the subject. Because it was family, because it was love, because I had learned that when it comes from inside the house, it isn't cruelty, it's care. It took me years to understand that care doesn't humiliate, that love doesn't make you want to disappear, that the people who truly want what's best for you don't need your body to be the starting point of every conversation. But back then I didn't know that. Back then I only knew that at home, my body was always on the agenda, and that somewhere along the way I had internalized that agenda as reasonable. When I started college at Ohio State, communications major, which my dad thought was impractical but eventually accepted, things shifted, but not the way I expected. I had freedom, I had a friend group, I had professors who took me seriously for what I produced, but I carried that voice from the dinner table everywhere I went. The voice that asked whether I should really order dessert. The voice that made me avoid mirrors in fitting rooms. The voice that said my work needed to be exceptional enough to compensate for how I looked. So I joined a gym, not for pleasure, for soft punishment, the kind you disguise as discipline. That's where I met Trevor Bosch, personal trainer at Peak Performance Fitness in Clintonville. 34 years old, certified in weight loss programming, teeth that were aggressively white, that energy of someone who had never once doubted his own value. I joined the gym in March, a month before my 22nd birthday, with the idea that I was going to train, feel better, find a rhythm. Trevor had been recommended by the front desk as the best they had. At the first assessment, he weighed me, took my measurements, wrote everything down on a clipboard without looking up and said, "With your weight history, you're going to need a lot of consistency. It's not impossible, but it's slow. Do you have commitment?" "Yes," I said. "Great." He wrote something else down. "Because most women who come in at your level quit before the 3-month mark." Not a criticism, just a statistic. I swallowed that like it was a normal thing to say. He was the expert after all. But Trevor Bosch had a method that took me way too long to name for what it was. He humiliated to motivate. It was subtle. It was calculated. And for months I confused the discomfort I felt during sessions with progress, when the discomfort I was actually feeling was shame. But that comes in its own time. First, let me introduce you to Jason. I met Jason Hargrove. He took my last name when we married, and I loved that. Loved the idea that we were building something new together. At a graduation party for a mutual friend, 3 years into college, he was 26, worked in project management, was attentive, funny, the kind of man who actually listens when you talk. We dated for 2 years before we got married. During those 2 years, he never once commented on my body. Not once. And I thought that was enough. I learned later that the absence of cruelty is not the presence of respect. They're different things, and the difference between them can take years to surface. The gym was where my humiliation had a standing appointment 3 times a week. Trevor Bosch was punctual, efficient, and had a sense of humor he used as a weapon. When I couldn't finish a set, he'd say, loud enough for the other clients nearby to hear, "Come on, Danielle. The belly's not going to stop you." When I improved a cardio time, he'd log it and say, "Good. You're going to need a lot more of that." When I showed up exhausted after a long workday, he'd ask with that sideways grin, "What happened?" "Bad lunch choices." Each comment was a needle. Small, fine, the kind you don't feel going in, only when you pull it out. There was another client at the gym, a woman named Sierra, thin, blonde, a runner's build, who Trevor held up as an example constantly. "Sierra trains fasted and look at the results. Sierra doesn't complain when it hurts. Did you see Sierra on the treadmill? That's what dedication looks like." I'd watch Sierra from a distance and she barely knew I existed. She probably had no idea her name was being used as the measuring stick for my failure every single week. I stayed with Trevor for 11 months. 11 months paying $280 per session package for someone who was teaching me to hate myself more efficiently. And during that same period, my mom started forwarding articles to the family group chat. Articles about nutrition, metabolism, how to finally lose the weight. Sometimes with a comment, sometimes without. Sometimes to the whole group with my sisters, sometimes just to me. Once she sent a piece titled, "Why Some Women Can't Lose Weight No Matter How Hard They Try." And I sat staring at my phone for 5 minutes trying to decide if it was cruel or caring. I still don't know. My work in that period was going well. I had graduated, done a graduate certificate in organizational communication, started taking on consulting contracts with mid-sized companies that needed help restructuring their internal communications. It was work I loved, walking into an environment that was communicating badly and helping people understand each other again. Almost like translation, and I was good at it. Actually good. Not the self-deprecating kind of good women use when they're afraid of sounding arrogant. But I carried with me, into every new contract, every new meeting, that voice, the one that said, "You have to be more than good enough to make up for how you look." Jason and I got married on a rainy October Saturday, small ceremony at a vineyard outside of Columbus, 43 guests, lemon cake I had chosen with the baker myself. It was beautiful. I was happy. For the first 18 months of marriage, Jason said nothing about my body, but I started to notice other things. When we went out and I ordered dessert at a restaurant, he wouldn't say anything, but he'd look away in a specific way. When I bought new clothes and showed him, he'd compliment me, but always with a qualifier at the end. "That looks nice. Imagine how good it'll look when you drop a little weight." When his mother Barbara would visit and comment on my body, which happened with a regularity that unsettled me, Jason would go quiet, the quiet of someone who agrees without needing to say it. And then came the new gym episode. Jason gave me a membership at a private training studio in the short north. Expensive, well-equipped, nutritional assessment included. I accepted it with the smile I had learned to make when I didn't know what to feel. "You don't have to go if you don't want to," he said. "I just thought it might help." Help. Help with what exactly? Help me exist in a way that was more acceptable to whom? I didn't ask. I should have asked. I went to the studio. The new trainer's name was Cody Renfrew, 31 years old, specializing in body recomposition. Wall of certifications at the entrance. At the first assessment, he weighed me, measured my body fat with a device that seemed to judge before it even showed the number, and said, "You've got a lot to work with here. But before I build your protocol, I need to understand your eating patterns. Are you eating a lot at night?" "Normal amounts," I said. "Normal for whom?" he asked, pen hovering over the clipboard. I didn't answer. He didn't wait. Because normal for someone at your current weight tends to be different from the normal we need to get results. Not a criticism, just a baseline. It was the exact same sentence Trevor Bosch had used, word for word, as if there were a manual on how to make a fat woman feel guilty before the first training session even starts. I went to the studio for 3 weeks, then I stopped going. I told Jason the schedule wasn't working. He accepted it, but the membership had cost $1,800 for 3 months, and that money kept coming up, in different ways, in different contexts, for the following 2 months. "You gave up again," he said one night, not angrily, with that flat voice that was worse than anger. "I expected more from you, Danielle, and I stayed quiet, because I had learned to stay quiet. But that night was the beginning of something. I can't fully explain it. It was like something inside me heard that sentence and decided, enough. Not dramatically, not with a slammed door or a breakdown or a speech. It was a decision that didn't have words yet, only direction. But before the turning point came the bottom. The bottom has an address and a time. It was a Thursday evening in August, 7:45, at Cody Renfrew's studio. I had gone back. Jason had pushed, not exactly pushed, had done that thing that looks like a request but functions as pressure, and I had gone back. I was on the treadmill when Cody called the advanced group over for a circuit session. 6 people, all with the bodies I had been taught to understand as the goal, none with the body I had. While I kept walking on the treadmill, Cody passed by me and said, without stopping, almost as a casual observation, "You have to work the mindset before you work the body, because no amount of training helps if your head isn't in it." I stopped the treadmill. I didn't say anything. I picked up my water bottle, my jacket, my bag. I walked out of the studio. I called Jason on the way to my car. He didn't pick up. I called again. Didn't pick up. I sat in the driver's seat and stared at the windshield for 12 minutes. I counted. 12 minutes of complete silence where I decided that I was not going to spend one more second of my life being made small by people I was paying to help me. But the most important decision of that night wasn't about the studio. It was about what I saw when I got home. Jason was on the couch with his phone. When I walked in, he looked up, read my face and said, "Left early?" "Yes." "Why?" I went to get water from the kitchen. When I came back, he still had the phone in his hand, waiting for a justification I no longer had any interest in offering. "Jason, do you love me the way I am?" He blinked. Set the phone down. "Where is that coming from?" "It's a direct question. Do you love me the way I am?" "Of course I do. But that doesn't mean I don't want what's best for you. And what's best for me, in your view, includes me being different from what I am." He was quiet, And that silence answered me more than anything he could have said. I didn't fight. I went to bed. And that night, lying in the dark looking at the ceiling of the bedroom we had picked out together, with the quilt my grandmother had made as a wedding gift, I understood that I was surrounded by people who loved me with a condition that had never been stated out loud, but was present in everything. The condition was, be less, and I was exhausted from trying to fit into a space no one had the right to define for me. The turning point doesn't have a dramatic soundtrack. Mine didn't. It happened on a Saturday morning, 3 weeks after the night at the studio. I was sitting at the kitchen table with a notebook open, drinking coffee, when my friend Tamara called. Tamara had been my best friend since our sophomore year of college. She'd moved to Chicago 2 years earlier for a job, but we talked every month. She asked how I was doing, and I started to talk. I told her about the studio, about Cody, about the conversation with Jason, about my mom, about 11 months of Trevor Bosch. I told her all of it without theatrics, without crying, just told it. And when I finished, Tamara was quiet for a few seconds, and then she said something I wasn't expecting. Danielle, you just described 2 years of a life where every single person who was supposed to be in your corner was working against you, and you're still apologizing for your own body. I started to disagree. She kept going. I'm not talking about weight. I'm not talking about the gym. I'm talking about the fact that you have completely normalized people you pay, people you love, people you sleep next to, using your body as a reason to make you feel like less. And you're so used to it you don't even see it anymore. I stared at the coffee going cold in my mug. Nobody has the right to use your body as their agenda, she said. Not to love you, not to help you, not to motivate you. Your body is not a problem to be solved. It's where you live. I cried, not from sadness, from recognition. That phone call was the beginning, not of a diet, not of a training plan, of a decision to stop apologizing for existing as I existed, and to start looking clearly at the people around me and asking, does this person make me better or make me smaller? I started therapy. My therapist's name is Vivian Okafor. Her office is on North High Street in Columbus, Tuesdays and Thursdays at 5 o'clock. I'm not going to romanticize it. It was hard. The first sessions I'd leave with more questions than I arrived with. But Vivian had a skill I hadn't expected. She wouldn't let me run from the real question. The real question wasn't, why can't I lose weight? The real question was, when did I learn that my value depends on what my body looks like? And as I started answering that question, honestly, without the polished vocabulary we use when we want to appear like we're doing fine, a lot of things began to reorganize themselves. My relationship with food changed, not because I started eating right, because I stopped eating with guilt. I started moving in ways I actually enjoyed, morning walks along the Scioto Mile, swing dance lessons on Wednesday evenings at a studio in German Village. Not because I needed to lose weight, because my body wanted to move and I had spent years stopping it out of shame. My relationship with Jason got clearer too, and not in the way I'd hoped. As I got more grounded, I stopped absorbing the silences, the averted eyes, the qualified compliments. I started responding, not with aggression, with clarity. And Jason didn't know how to handle clarity. He knew how to handle a version of me that justified herself, apologized, tried to do better. The version who said, no, this isn't okay and I need you to see that, was new, and it frightened him. Vivian helped me see that his discomfort was not my problem to manage. And then came the invitation to give the presentation. Jason came home on a Wednesday with an idea he framed as a favor. Courtney, my boss, is putting together an internal communications initiative. I mentioned you. She wants to meet you about a possible consulting arrangement. I said yes. I scheduled a meeting with Courtney Aldridge the following week, walked her through my portfolio, discussed scope and fees. She was efficient, sharp, said little, and listened less. But we closed a contract. I would give a presentation to the 32 employees of Meridian Peak Solutions on assertive communication, the topic I knew best, and then present a restructuring proposal to the leadership team. I worked on that presentation for 3 weeks. It was the largest contract I had landed to that point. $12,000 for the presentation and initial assessment, with potential for a year-long retainer if the proposal was approved. I knew I was good. I knew that material was solid. I arrived at Meridian Peak on Monday morning at 8:20. Briefcase, laptop, printed copies. The receptionist walked me to the conference room. I set everything up, tested the projector, reviewed my notes. And then, Courtney Aldridge walked in. You already know what happened. You already know the line. Now I understand why Jason stays late at the office. And the laughter. What you don't know is what happened inside me in that second. For one moment, just one, I felt the old voice. The voice from the dinner table, from Cody's studio, from Jason's silences. The voice that said, "Put your head down, absorb it, keep moving." And then another voice, newer, steadier, the one Vivian had helped me find, said, "No." I turned 2 steps. I looked Courtney Aldridge in the eyes. "Funny how?" I said, with the calm that comes from when you have nothing left to lose because you finally decided you don't need anyone's approval. "The only comment you could make about the consultant you hired was about my body. I wonder what your employees feel when leadership can't see past appearance." Silence. Not the old silence, the uncomfortable kind, the one that fills the air when someone says something cruel and the room doesn't know whether to laugh or go quiet. This was a different kind of silence, the kind that settles when someone says something true out loud, and the air in the room shifts. Courtney Aldridge opened her mouth, closed it. "Shall I continue?" I asked, looking at the group behind her. "Because I have a presentation to give, and this is the best material on assertive communication this company is going to see." And I gave it. I gave the sharpest presentation of my career. 2 hours and 15 minutes. When I finished, 3 people came up to ask questions. 2 asked for my card. One of them was the CFO. Courtney Aldridge left before it ended. But that's not where the story ends. The ending is what I discovered 3 weeks later. 2 weeks after the presentation, I got a LinkedIn message from a woman named Monica Chu. She wrote, "Danielle, my name is Monica. I worked at Meridian Peak for 2 years. Could we talk?" I called her that evening. Monica was 37, had been the marketing manager at Meridian Peak, had resigned 7 months earlier. She reached out because someone who'd been at the presentation told her what Courtney had said when I walked into the room. "She did the same thing to me," Monica said. "At my first presentation to the leadership team, I walked in and she said to the room, loud enough for everyone to hear, 'She's from marketing, clearly not from a gym.' I didn't say anything. I didn't respond," Monica continued. "I absorbed it. I kept working. But every month there was something. A comment about what I was eating at lunch. A remark about my clothes. Once she called me into a one-on-one and told me I needed to pay more attention to professional presentation because leadership roles require it. I resigned 7 months later." "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked. "Because when they told me what you said to her, I thought, I wish I had said that. And then I thought, maybe it's time to say it." "What do you want to do?" She paused. "I saved everything. Every text, every email. I have 2 audio recordings from meetings that my attorney told me to keep. I want to file a formal complaint with the Ohio Civil Rights Commission, but I don't want to do it alone." I sat with that for a moment. "Send me your attorney's contact," I said. And then came the second twist, the one I genuinely did not see coming. 1 week after talking to Monica, Jason came home earlier than usual. He sat at the kitchen table, the same spot where I'd talked to Tamara months before, and looked at the table for a long time before speaking. "Courtney called me. I kept making dinner. She said you were difficult at the presentation." "Difficult," I repeated without turning around. "She said you were aggressive when she came in, that it made the team uncomfortable." I turned. I looked at him. "Jason, do you know what she said when she walked into the room?" He looked away. "She gave me her side of it. And her side includes humiliating me in front of 30 people before the presentation even started." Silence. "Do you believe her or do you believe me?" He stared at the table. And I understood in that moment, with the kind of clarity that hurts the way true things hurt, that his silence was the most honest answer he had given me in a long time. It wasn't a fight. It wasn't tears. It was a long conversation, well into the night, where I laid out everything I had held in for the past 2 years. The averted eyes, the silences when Barbara commented on my body, the gym membership that wasn't really a gift, the qualified compliments, the night I asked if he loved me as I was and he couldn't answer. Everything I had swallowed came back to the table, organized, without anger, with clarity. Jason listened, and when I finished, he said, "I didn't know you were experiencing it like that. You didn't ask," I said. "And when I tried to show you, you sided with them." "Sided with them? I was only trying to do what was best for you. What's best for me can't be defined by you, Jason. Not by your boss, not by your mother, not by the trainer you paid for. What's best for me is defined by me." He was quiet for a long time, and then, "I don't know if I know how to do it differently." And that was, paradoxically, the most honest thing he had said during the entire marriage. We went to couples therapy. 3 months. Vivian referred me to a colleague who worked with couples, Dr. Margaret Stills, office on Broad Street. 3 months of Monday sessions where we tried to understand whether there was a path forward. Jason showed up in good faith. I believe that. But good faith doesn't repair years of a pattern that neither of you even knew you were building. In the final month of therapy, Dr. Stills asked each of us separately what we wanted in the next 5 years. I said, "I want to do work I love move in ways that feel good, wake up without feeling like I have to justify the space I take up. Jason said, I want to start a family, buy a house in Bexley, and for Danielle to be okay. We drove home that night in silence. Before we got out of the car, I said, did you notice that you said for Danielle to be okay like it's a goal of yours? Like my well-being is something you're going to achieve? He didn't respond. 3 weeks later, I brought the divorce paperwork to my attorney. Monica Chu filed her complaint with the Ohio Civil Rights Commission, with the 2 audio recordings, 23 emails, and testimonies from 4 other former employees she had located over the course of 2 months. I signed on as a witness to one of the incidents, the one involving my presentation. Documented by a meeting summary the CFO had emailed me 1 week after the event, noting that I had delivered the presentation with exceptional technical skill. That email was in the filing. The complaint was submitted. The investigation was opened. Courtney Aldridge was placed on administrative leave while the commission investigated. Meridian Peak Solutions brought in an outside HR consulting firm, not mine. They didn't call me and I wouldn't have taken it, to review their management practices. Jason stayed on at the company. We haven't exchanged a word about it. What happened with Jason after the divorce is simple. We separated amicably on civil terms. We divided the apartment, the furniture, the accounts. He got the car. I got the fully equipped kitchen, which was actually the better deal because I cook and he doesn't. Barbara called me once, after she heard the news. She tried the version where I had overreacted, where Jason was a good man, where the problems in the marriage were on both sides. I said, Barbara, you're right that the problems were on both sides. But one side spent years being diminished and the other stayed quiet. Those aren't the same thing. She didn't call again. Jason reached out 2 months after the separation. He sent a message saying he thought he'd made mistakes, that he wanted to talk. I replied with one short message. Jason, I genuinely wish you well, but I don't have anything left to talk about. I learned what I needed to learn. You will too. I didn't respond again. Courtney Aldridge sent me an email 4 months after her administrative leave began. It wasn't an apology. It was a rewritten version of the story in which she had not intended to cause offense, and was sorry if I had taken it the wrong way. I forwarded it to Monica's attorney. He said it was irrelevant to the complaint but good to have on record. The complaint runs its course. The process takes the time it takes. What I know is that I did my part. Today, I live in an apartment in the Short North, a neighborhood I chose for myself, without a single consultation. 2 bedrooms, a patio where I grow tomatoes and herbs, a kitchen organized exactly the way I want it. I get up early, make coffee, read for half an hour before I open my laptop. The consulting practice has grown. In the 12 months following the presentation at Meridian Peak, yes, that presentation, I signed 5 new contracts. 2 came from direct referrals by people who were in that room that morning. The CFO referred me to a contact at another company. The communications coordinator at Meridian Peak itself reached out after Courtney was placed on leave and asked for a proposal. I accepted. My relationship with my body has changed in a way I'm still looking for the right words to describe. It's not that I woke up one day and started loving myself unconditionally. It doesn't work like that. It's more like the internal conversation changed in tone. Before it was accusation, now it's curiosity. Before it was, why are you like this? Now it's, what do you need today? I still walk the Scioto Mile in the mornings. I still take swing dance on Wednesdays. I started swimming on Saturday mornings at an indoor pool in Grandview Heights. No trainer, no protocol, just me and the water and whatever pace I choose. Tamara came to visit last month. We cooked together, opened a bottle of wine, talked until midnight. When she was leaving, she looked at me and said, "You seem different." Different how? I asked. Like someone who isn't apologizing for being here anymore. I've been thinking about that for days. It's the best description I've ever heard. Before I close, I want to talk to you directly, not as a character. As a person who lived this and knows there's a real chance you're living some version of it too. Weight stigma doesn't always wear the face of explicit cruelty. Most of the time it wears the face of concern. I'm telling you this because I love you. It's for your own good. Don't you want to take care of yourself? Any doctor will tell you the same thing. It lives inside your home, inside your doctor's office, inside your gym, inside your workplace. And it is so thoroughly normalized that you can spend years repeating other people's words inside your own head without realizing they were never yours. One of the clearest signs of weight stigma from family is when comments about your body are disguised as concern for your health. If someone in your family comments on what you eat at Thanksgiving, what you're wearing at a birthday dinner, how much you've gained since they last saw you, that is not care. Care asks how you're doing on the inside. Surveillance comments on how you look on the outside. If you've ever gone to a doctor's appointment with a real symptom and left hearing that your weight was the problem, without the doctor having run a single test, without being asked about your emotional history, your routines, your life, you have the right to find a different doctor. That is not being difficult. That is the bare minimum. You have the right to be treated as a whole person, not a number on a scale. Internalized weight stigma is the voice inside your head that repeats in your own tone what other people said. I don't deserve this. When I lose the weight, then I can. I need to make up for it. Recognizing that voice as not yours, that it was placed there over years by people who looked at you and decided your body was a problem to solve, is slow work. But it is the most important work there is. You do not need to lose weight to deserve respect. You do not need to lose weight to be hired, to be loved, to be taken seriously. You do not need to lose weight to stand up in front of a room and demand to be seen as the professional you are. The problem was never your body. The problem was always the people around you who decided they had the right to use it as currency. There's a question I ask myself sometimes late at night when the apartment is quiet and I'm holding a cup of tea and the window is open to the street below. The question is, what would have happened if I had stayed quiet in that conference room? And the answer I always land on is the same. I would have given an excellent presentation. I would have walked out with my materials under my arm and the humiliation inside my chest. I would have gotten home, told Jason carefully enough to not sound like complaining, heard some version of, "That's just how she is. Don't take it personally." And I would have stored one more layer of silence over everything I felt, and the pattern would have continued. Courtney Aldridge's pattern. Meridian Peak's pattern. And the pattern of my entire life. Silence protects the person doing the humiliating, not the one being humiliated. It took me 32 years to learn that in a way that lived in my body, not just my head. That calm I felt when I turned and took those 2 steps toward her didn't come from nowhere. It came from months of therapy with Vivian. It came from conversations with Tamara. It came from every morning walk along the river where I wasn't counting anything, just wanted to walk. It came from every time I cooked something good and ate it without logging it, without guilt. It came from every Wednesday night swing dance where I let my body move the way it wanted, without comparing myself to anyone. It came from deciding one ordinary day that I was worth the space I occupied, not because someone told me so, because I decided. Yesterday morning at 6:45 I was standing at the edge of the pool in Grandview Heights, swim cap on, goggles in hand, looking at the still water before anyone else arrived, and I thought, look how far you've come, not with excessive pride, with that quiet kind of recognition that goes deeper than pride. The recognition that you survived something that almost convinced you it wasn't worth being fully here, and that you didn't just survive, you built on the other side, a life you recognize as yours. I got in the water, and I swam. If this story reached something in you that you didn't expect, tell me in the comments. Tell me where you are on this road. If you're still in the middle of the humiliation, in the middle of the silence, in the middle of the lowest point, I want you to know that place has a way out, not a fast one, not one that involves changing your body to satisfy the people who hurt you. A way out that starts with the question Vivian taught me to ask myself, what do you need today? Answer that question. For yourself, for no one else. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Share this video with someone you think needs to hear that they're not alone. And from the bottom of my heart, thank you for staying with me all the way to the end. You are not alone. There's something I want to add before I close, because I think it's important and it rarely gets said clearly. When I started talking about all of this, first with Tamara, then in therapy with Vivian, then in longer conversations with friends who kept appearing as I opened up, I realized something that surprised me. I wasn't alone. I wasn't the only person who had endured a trainer who used humor as a weapon. I wasn't the only person whose mom forwarded wellness articles to the family group chat without understanding the weight each one carried. I wasn't the only person in a marriage where the absence of direct cruelty had been mistaken for the presence of real love. There were many of us. There are many of us. And that has 2 possible readings. The first, which arrived first, was grief. How many of us normalize things that should never have been normal? How many of us learn to make ourselves smaller? How many of us confuse tolerating humiliation with being strong? The second reading, which came after, was something different. If there are many of us, we are also enough to shift the air in the rooms we walk into. Every time someone says out loud what I said in that conference room, every time someone doesn't absorb the humiliation but instead names it calmly and precisely, something changes. Not dramatically, not overnight, but it changes. Courtney Aldridge was used to her comments passing without consequence, not because people agreed with her, but because people had learned it wasn't worth responding, that it was easier to take it in and keep moving. I decided I wasn't going to take it in, not as a heroic act, as an act of basic self-preservation. And what surprised me was that act, those 2 steps I took toward her, that sentence I said in a low voice, had an effect I hadn't calculated. It made Monica write to me. It made 4 other women who had lived through the same thing with Courtney willing to give their testimony. It made the CFO send me that meeting summary. I didn't do it thinking about any of that. I did it because I couldn't do anything else. But it turned out that doing what I couldn't avoid doing had real consequences for real people I didn't even know. That's also part of the story. If you're in a workplace where someone in a position of power uses your body, your appearance, your size as a form of control or ridicule, you have the right to name what is happening. You have the right to document it. You have the right to report it. In the United States, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission and state-level civil rights agencies exist to receive complaints of workplace discrimination and harassment. The processes are not fast, they are not perfect, but they exist. And if the environment where this is happening is your own home, if the person who uses your body as a constant topic of conversation is someone you love, you also have the right to name it, to say, "This is not care, this is hurting me." And if the person on the other side of that cannot hear it, that is also an answer. You don't have to keep absorbing it to prove you're strong. Strength is not absorption. Strength is knowing when you are done absorbing. One last thing. The morning after I filed the divorce paperwork, I woke up early and sat with my coffee by the window for a long time. I expected to feel something overwhelming. Guilt, grief, the specific sadness of the end of something you once believed in. What I felt was quieter than any of that. It was the particular piece of a decision made from the inside out. Not because anyone told me to, not because the circumstances forced me, not because I had finally become acceptable enough to deserve something different, because I had decided. There is a version of this story where I stayed, where I absorbed what Courtney said and went back to my seat, where I came home that night and softened the story for Jason, where I kept going to trainers who made me feel like a problem and kept reading articles my mom forwarded and kept fitting myself into spaces that were never sized for who I actually was. That version of the story doesn't have a dramatic ending. It just keeps going, a little quieter every year until the person inside it forgets she ever wanted anything different. I chose not to be that version. You can too. Whatever room you're standing in right now, whatever voice you've been carrying that was never yours to begin with, you can set it down. Not all at once, not perfectly, but you can start. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Tell me in the comments, what is one thing you have stopped apologizing for? I want to read every answer. Thank you for being here. That means more than you know.